I'm going to talk about a particular work we did, which is looking at how people value or show their preference for a range of trees in urban environment. Hopefully, I'll go over why this research has some implication or why this is important, and more importantly, how we did it. So I'll focus on some of the methodological aspect as well. So we had one fellow from Chinese university at that time who came to visit UWA and work with us in terms of initial data analysis actually, and he's now a PhD student in Carnegie Mellon, so he has contributed some to this work. Before coming to a preference for individual species in an urban environment, as you all know now, we are in an urbanized planet, which basically means more people are living in cities than in rural areas. The Science magazine dedicated one particular issue in 2016 to talk about what's happening in urban environment and how, of course, with urbanization comes different type of services and benefits that we can get, but it also brings some sort of challenges in terms of environmental issues and so forth. And one of that issue is referred as heat island effect. We have more built-up structures, blacktops, and so forth, and urban core remains always hotter than the periphery. And if you look at this, this is a rural area, from rural towards the city center. As we move towards the city center, both the daytime and nighttime temperature slightly increases, increases, and in the core it remains high, both in day and night. But if there are trees or parks or some sort of structure that ameliorate that temperature, the temperature goes down, which is one of the benefits of the trees or parks in urban environment. Of course, they provide range of other benefits, but increasingly this particular benefit, which is how do they mitigate the heat island effect, is becoming important for policymakers, planners, both at local and central level. As a result, globally, this, of course, the interest has been grown globally in urban forestry or urban green infrastructure and so forth. But if we focus in Australia, Australia has initiated a vision, what they call the 20-20-20 vision, which basically means in Australian cities, they would like to develop 20% of tree canopy cover by 2020. And a range of local no, that better get on with it. There are a range of public and private organizations involved in it. It is a significant consortium actually, and some of you might be familiar with there is a CRC working on this urban environment issue, and of course besides that, cities, city councils, universities, and public-private organizations. I can't name all of them. You can see plenty of them are involved, more than 600 actually, involved in this initiative. And then they are trying to promote urban forestry in Australian cities, basically. That's what they are trying to do. Of course, the benefits, as I mentioned, there could be multitude of benefits that initiative could provide. What does it mean then? It basically means now the city councils are working very hard to develop their urban forestry strategy. Even if they don't have any strategy in the past, they are working towards that. But some of the cities have been working on this space for quite some time, like Melbourne. Their motto is, you can see, making a great city greener. And they developed a strategy in 2012 that runs for another 20 years up until 2032. Similarly, Perth has also developed a 20-year strategy in 2016, which will end up in 2036. 26. Sorry? 26. 36 after 20 years. So the point is, if you look at very closely the strategy of City of Perth, what we see is, of course, they would like to work towards that heat island effect, for example, prioritize tree planting to help cool public space and city hot spots, promote balance and resilience in species composition. So what type of species should we plant so that there will be a resilience? If we plant a monoculture and some sort of pest or insect infestation happens, so we face a problem. Like in Canberra, some sort of that problem has occurred. So they would like to maintain that, promoting balance and resilience by selecting different species. Similarly, of course, increase tree canopy cover, 20-20-20, and promote community engagement. So a range of goals have set, which basically work towards, okay, how we can make our city greener and get these different type of environmental benefits. Well, all good. Yep, that's very good. But where do we plant trees in urban areas? Where are the spaces available for that purpose? One can think of course, the public space, the parks and city birds, school ovals, those sort of things are one. And then if you think besides that, then you have to ask individuals, the private space. They are one space. Of course, if we talk about Perth, very expensive place, and then the space has quite high opportunity cost. So private residential areas as well as public spaces are the ones that are available in cities, and their demand is substantially high. So in terms of promoting urban forestry in that sort of situation, looking back to their priorities or goals, selecting species which are more preferred by the residents would be one of the ways to think about promoting it. What do we know about that? If we think about the species on public land, research suggests that people prefer species that provide aesthetics and safety. If we think about private land, even though it's relatively, it's not that old, small fruit trees, whether they are forest trees or fruit trees, but they prefer small fruit trees. But if we think about, think of yourself as, okay, you have a limited, you are in your property, and what do you want to do in your property, or if you want to plant some sort of trees or fruit trees or whatever, you may also be thinking about what you would like to see in the neighborhood or what you like to see in the neighboring property. If you may not have any way to impose that sort of thought, but you may prefer something to happen in the neighborhood. So in thinking about that, we did a bit of the study earlier to look at what are the values of trees if they are in these different spaces, public space or private space, and we find quite a mixed result. Only public space, if trees are on public space, they add value. If they are on your own property, not much of a difference, insignificant. And if they are in your adjacent property, it even reduces the value of your property. Maybe you have a solar panel and whatever the reason is, but we found a mixed result in that context. So thinking about that and trying to come up with, okay, what are the species that people prefer in these three different types of species that are perhaps available for tree planting in urban environment. We conducted this research, and we were interested in to understand public preference for trees by location on their own property, in the neighboring or adjacent property, or on the public space. Particularly, we focus on the street verge, not the park, but the street verge. And we were also interested to know about what are the factors affecting households' engagement or involvement in tree planting, because city councils, so they are working towards it, and maybe this information might be useful for them. But for the rest of the talk, I won't focus on this, and I'll focus on the first question, which is what we found in terms of public preference for different trees in two different cities, Perth and Melbourne, in three different locations, on their own property, on neighboring property, as well as on street verge. So we did a survey of over 800 800 people through an online, through the help of an online survey platform or agency. More or less, the sample was more or less split around 400. And we asked a range of things, including their socio-demographic information and their preference for different type of trees. And we provided a set of trees, a photograph of trees, and then asked them to pick which tree out of 7. They are asked to pick 7 trees out of 24 or 25 pool of trees. They can pick, this is the first preferred tree on my own property, this is the first preferred tree on the street verge, this is the first preferred tree on neighboring property, and so forth. So we asked them to pick top 7 trees for those 3 locations. And there were a mix of trees. Some were native. For example, in the case of Perth, there were 24 trees we provided. 14 were native, 10 species were exotic. In Melbourne, 1 more trees in total, same number of native species and 11 exotic species. So the question is, how did we come up with this number? We looked at what are the popular tree species planted in city councils in these 2 cities, and they have some reports showing what different tree species are available and they are promoting, and that's how we picked up. You may raise a question that, okay, there are thousands of trees and why only 24 or 25, but that's the way we kind of come up with the number, with the idea of mix of exotic and native species. And these are the species actually. You may wonder, London plane tree, these are the 14 common species provided to the respondent in both the cities. London plane, willow myrtle, peppermint gum, Queensland box tree, yellow gum, and so on and so forth. So these are, the respondent in both cities have seen this. A respondent in Perth have seen those common tree plus these 11 species, which includes some species which are, you might perhaps start to infer something by looking at some of these photographs, the yellow flame, Jacaranda, and these other trees, which are only available to Perth respondents, and these are other 11 species only available to Melbourne respondents. Double rose cherry plum, pink oak, I think, rosea red ironbark, and a range of them. So they went, when they started to respond to survey questions, they have provided some of the basic information, and then these pictures came up for these 3 different locations, and they pick one picture and put it in those order for 7. So they were asked to pick only 7. Yep.
Clarification, were they informed about whether the trees lost the leaves in winter or not?
Oh, no.
Because for me that would be an essential
choice. They can infer on their own way, they can think of, but we did not inform them. Yep.
So you just provided the picture and no other information?
Yeah, not about individually specific information. We did not provide that. Okay? That may come up with the result, what you are saying. Maybe you might see that sort of things. Then what can happen? We use this specific pairwise comparison model called Bradley-Terry model. The idea with this is, of course, the frequency could give us some information, but we would like to know a relative preference of the trees. So this allows us to measure the relative preference among the species they have selected. So there are 3 possibilities in terms of what they have selected. Both trees belong to top 7, so then first is preferred to second, not a problem. One belongs to top 7 out of 24 or 25, and another doesn't belong to top 7. So you have one-to-one combination, multiple combination of trees to look at. So there are 3 possible scenarios. The first one is if the preference order gives us the clear idea which one is preferred compared to the other one. If they did not did pick up one tree, and if we are comparing that one with the other tree which is not picked up, clearly the one they picked up is the preferred one. And if any tree does not enter into that 7 choices, then we cannot infer anything about that. It's difficult to establish preference order in that case, and we treated that as a missing data. And the point is, if someone selected 7, someone selected 7 for one location, and in the mix of all the samples out of about 800, if they haven't picked up any tree by any respondent, then we cannot infer. So we treated that as a missing data, and there were some.
How are they choosing? So you have the 25 species.
Mm-hmm.
How do they choose?
They just picked whatever they want.
Out of the 25?
Out of 25, they picked up 7. And then this is the first one, this is the second preferred one, this is the third preferred one, and so forth.
Okay, so this isn't really a set of choices. This is
Yep.
You're now presenting
the analysis.
full set of comparisons.
Yes, this is the analysis, how we did the analysis.
What they would have chosen, you think, given where they ranked.
Yep. This is the way we analyze the information. They just picked up 7, whatever they wanted, but we asked them to maintain the preference order: first one, second one, third one, all the way to 5th one. Seventh, for those 3 locations.
Yeah.
And then, given that information, if you look at the all information available, these 3 possibilities exist in the choices when you compare individual tree with other tree.
How did you frame the question? Were they choosing trees to plant in their own garden, to see in the parks? What was the choice based on?
Location. One
What
is
are the 3 locations?
on their own property, within their premises.
Okay, so that's 7 for each of
Yep, each of those 3 locations on their own property, on neighboring property, immediate next door neighbor, and then on public space, in this case on a street verge, which is just in front of their property, but it is a public space.
So basically they were presented the choices 3 times.
Yep, they were given the, and one of the things is that we did not change the species for those 3 locations. They got the same species for 3 locations. They were offered that 3 times. You're right. Okay, so the way that when the information came in, then I mentioned we use this particular model to compare the choices they have made. One of the things we were interested in knowing how valuable a given tree relative to the other, and for that purpose, this particular model help us to define the probability of choosing tree I. Okay, I is preferred to tree J in a given comparison. We are comparing 2 species. That can be expressed as probability of choosing I greater than probability of choosing tree J, contingent or depends on their worth, which they infer. Is given by the worth of tree I. That's the ratio of the worth of tree I over the worth of both of the trees. So that's how they infer. Okay, this tree is better than that one. Where this pi I and pi j are the non-negative parameters describing the location of the trees on the preference scale. Okay, where exactly not clear, but this is better than that. That's how we model that probability. The number of all possible pairs for a set of n trees can be given by n times n minus 1 over 2. If you think of all the tree combinations for 24 species in one city, it will be 276 comparison. But an individual just picked up 7, so for an individual there will be 21 comparisons we can make. This is a little bit heavy, but perhaps this is where the modeling part is, and I might skip it, but just for the sake of clarity, there are a number of comparisons we have to make. Total number of comparisons, as I said, for an individual in one location, there are 21 comparisons we have to make. The number of preferences for tree I would be denoted by Tijji, and the number of preferences for tree J would be denoted by Tijj. So whether they pick tree 1 or 2 or 1 or 3. The distribution of, we assume that these preferences, what they have picked up, is distributed randomly following a Poisson distribution, 0 or 1. And the expected number of that preference of for tree I to tree J is given by this, which is m iji equal n ij times probability of iji. This is small I. Then we simply regress that using a log linear form of that model. So log of this expected number of preference for a given tree in a given comparison is given by sum of the nuisance parameter. This is, think of it as some sort of constant, plus these are species tree I and tree J. You see this plus and minus. If they have picked up tree I, it got the positive sign. If they have picked up tree J, they got the J got the positive sign. And we model this. You can think of this, the expected number of preference for a given species is a function of this nuisance parameter, which is mu ij, and then the tree specific parameter lambda I or lambda j. And this is related to this lambda I or lambda j, that is related to the worth of that species by this equation, which is log of the worth of a given species is equal to 2 times the parameter estimate. So this is the underlying sort of methodology based on this particular model.
Sorry, why was that particular form of the model chosen?
Because we are interested on relative comparison, okay? Let's say Jacaranda is better than bottlebrush, for example. A bottlebrush is better than some other species. We can look at the frequency and we can say that. But in the preference scale, how better Jacaranda is compared to the bottlebrush, we cannot say that. But with this particular approach, we can say that. In a preference scale, you can derive a scale, and within the scale, you can fit those where they stand. And you can see the relative worth of a species in some sense. So the model is very simple. We simply regressed that the count preference or the expected number of preference, or in this case exact counts, against the species using a particular packages in R, and it gives us those lambda, which are the coefficients.
So just get back, what's the exact count of? What's the Y?
The Y is the number of preferences for species I, for example, or species J.
The number of times it was chosen as
Chosen.
given the binary choice.
Yes, binary choices. Then we simply regress it using this particular form of the model, and it provides us that coefficient which I mentioned. One of the things then we manipulated is this worth of a species. We can constrain the total worth of all the species to 1 just to see the preference order. So we impose these constraints. When we impose that, then for a particular species, how worthy a given species is given by the exponential of 2 times the lambda I, weighted by the total worth of all the species. Here is an example of that. For example, this is in the case of Perth, we are looking at on individuals one property. We have about 409 responses. 409 individuals responded in this case. We regressed following that particular model, and these, you see here, these are all highly significant and negative, but they are all compared to bottlebrush. Bottlebrush is the best species. Compared to bottlebrush, these are the coefficients for other species. Yeah. No, some are positive. So what do you infer from here? Magnolia is better than bottlebrush. But by how much? We don't know.
So how does this differ from using alternative specific constants? So you have one of them normalized to 0, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's true.
How does it differ?
I'm not sure, maybe not.
Because that formula is a logic formula.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. The intent is to, perhaps that might do the same thing, but I'm not quite sure about that. The intent is to see the relative value of a species, and maybe we can even get that from that approach, what you are suggesting.
Information other than just, there is nothing about the tree that's going into it.
Yeah, but you can add that, some other information. You can add in the model. Someone asked earlier, deciduous versus evergreen, flowery one versus non-flowery tree. You can add that, but that is the extension. I haven't done that, but you can. So compared to bottlebrush, Magnolia is better. We can see perhaps Jacaranda is also better. Red flowering gum is better. We know that, but by how much, we don't know it. So this magnitude is the one which we were interested in, and you might see momentarily in terms of the magnitude as well. Once we know this, these are all lambda. For, let's say, for bottlebrush, pi I, if we think about that, then this is 0 for that one. Lambda I is 0. Sum of lambda I, we sum the sum of the expected value of 2 lambda j. So we have to sum up 2 times these coefficients, take the expected value, and then sum that up. So that gives us the specific worth of a given tree. So here is the result of that. This is for exactly the analysis I just showed you for one property in Perth. In the range of, this is the total worth is constant 1, so we can think of sum of these will be 1 if we add all of this. For example, third is somewhere here, 0.005 or whatever. If we add all of these, they will sum to 1. But the order looks, and the magnitude we can see. Let's say Jacaranda is in the top one, followed by Magnolia, not that much different, red flowering gum. They are more or less same. People prefer them more or less equally. Then comes the bottlebrush, which was the best case in our analysis, and all other with the negative coefficients, they are in this territory. If we look at the same analysis for neighboring property, result does not deviate in terms of the species by that much. Still, the Jacaranda is on the top, red flowering gum, ARE-UWA, Plum, bottlebrush, Magnolia. But you can see the worth, the relative value changes. So we see more concentration here in the other end, in the neighboring space. I am answering about what I prefer my neighbors would like to have in terms of spaces in his space. If we think about the street bars, which means on the immediate space in front of your property, the mix does not change that much. Of course, we see slightly different level of worth for different species, but the mix does not change much. Jacaranda still stands top, Magnolia second, followed by bottlebrush. So there is a little bit of movement in terms of the species in the case of Perth among those 3 locations. If we move to Melbourne, of course, one can say there is not much of a direct comparison we can make because the species were only 14 were common and 11 were different. That's okay. We can compare within the Melbourne itself. So double rose cherry stands the first, red flowering gum, second bottlebrush, Calvary pear, and the prickly leaved paperbark was ranked the last, or the worth of that species was the least one. Does not change much again in terms of the species ranking, but the worth differs. Double rose cherry, red flowering gum, bottlebrush, top 3. Here we see slightly different. Prickly leaved paperbark was the least worthy one earlier, and we see now rosy red ironbark as the least worthy one. And Queensland box is also in the bottom. This is on the street bars. More or less same result. The worth changes, but the result does not change in terms of the species for the most part. If we think overall, whatever we have given to them, this out of 14, people picked up 12 species, and no one picked up 2 species in Perth among the native. 3 exotic species were not picked up in Perth. in all the combination of the preference they could have given to us. In Melbourne, similarly, 3 native species and 2 exotic species were not picked up.
So you're saying that out of all of the 409 sets that they were putting up,
Yep.
3 of the native species, 2 of the native species never got.
Yeah, never picked up.
Top 7.
Sorry? No. Never picked up. Not. Yeah, never picked up means out of 7. Yeah, you can think
So
of.
they were never in the top 7.
Yeah. No one picked up them.
So now you've got a problem because you just know that they are. You can't put a weight on them in terms of their utility.
And then they are excluded. That's why. Missing observations. I mentioned earlier.
Okay, so so they're not included in that,
Yeah.
in that ranking thing?
Yeah. This is just in terms of the species, what we given to them, this is what happened. They were not entered into the analysis.
Yeah, okay.
Okay? I think I just to summarize the main result, the most and least preferred species, Jacaranda stands top in Perth, and double rose cherry plum stands top in Melbourne. But these 3 were the least ranked. The Queensland box, shock species and tort is the least ranked one or least worthy one in Perth. This Queensland box appears in Melbourne as well. The rosy red ironbark and prickly leaved paperback, they were the other 2 least worthy species in Melbourne. If we differentiate these species in terms of native versus exotic, 2 native species, no one preferred. 3 native species, no one preferred. In terms of the exotic, these were not preferred in Perth, and these 2 were not preferred in Melbourne. But the interesting thing is Magnolia. Magnolia stands quite high in Perth, but no one picked up as preferred one in Melbourne. I don't know the reason, but that's what the data suggests. So what does it mean? Possibly, maybe these results may have some sort of usefulness or not, or at least it will create some doubt on people's mind about what sort of species do they promote in planting trees in public space, and more so in private space, because it's an individual's decision. So if we align the selection of trees provided to them in line of their preference, the adoption might be a little bit higher. It could also help to engage public in planting preferred trees and private space. So, which basically means maybe it may help to fulfill this vision or whatever it is, 2020.